Chapter 13, Shadows Beneath the Ice. The Starlight Voyager had ventured into uncharted territory, gliding through the Arctic Circle's icy, crystalline waters. It was a harsh landscape, the sea covered in sheets of drifting ice, with jagged white peaks rising in the distance. It wasn't an expedition for the faint-hearted. The temperatures hovered well below freezing, and the wind howled through the desolate, unbroken silence. Captain Dana, Silver, Gray felt a thrill at the challenge. For all her years at sea, she'd rarely ventured this far north, into a world of frost and isolation. To her left, the ice stretched endlessly toward the horizon, reflecting the pale pink light of the early dawn. The crew had all bundled up in thick layers and were readying for what would be one of their toughest voyages yet. Their guests for this journey were as unconventional as the destination. An ex-military diver researching the effects of climate change on Arctic marine life, a young documentary filmmaker hoping to capture rare footage of polar bears, and a glaciologist intent on studying the patterns of melting ice sheets. They each carried the same intense anticipation, mixed with awe at the raw beauty and danger of the Arctic. Silver took a steady breath as she held the wheel, watching the thick chunks of ice drift past the hull. "Everyone prepared for a little cold adventure?" she called to the deck, her voice steady. Ray, the engineer, gave her a grim look. "A little cold? Silver, this is insane. The yacht wasn't built for these temperatures." Silver grinned. "Then it's a good thing we have you to keep her in shape, Ray." Ray muttered something about preferring the tropics, but he went below to check the heating system for the third time that morning. Inside the galley, Aiden was working his culinary magic, though he'd grumbled more than usual. "Who signed us up for this frozen nightmare?" He grunted, wrapping his gloved hands around a ladle of steaming soup. He was making thick potato and leek soup, rich with cream, trying to bring warmth to a place that defied it. Camille, the marine biologist, was unfazed by the cold, her excitement clear as she prepared her equipment. "These waters have been untouched by human interference for thousands of years. Who knows what we might find beneath the ice?" Ela, the deckhand, watched her, shivering despite her layers. "Find? Camille, I'm more worried about what might find us. I've heard stories about, well, things living under the ice." "Folklore, mostly," Camille replied with a reassuring smile. "The native Inuit have tales of the Kalupalik, a creature that lives under the ice and calls out to people to lure them down. But don't worry, Isla, I'll make sure nothing drags you under." Ela's eyes widened. "Not helping, Camille." In the main cabin, Owen, the yacht owner's son, sat listening, looking half amused, half terrified. Though Silver had insisted he earn his keep on board, he'd mostly stayed out of trouble, and he seemed genuinely interested in Camille's work. By mid-morning, the yacht had come to a stop near an expansive ice floe. Camille had planned a dive, determined to collect samples from the frigid waters. Her ex-military guest, Lars, was also suiting up, his face set in an expression of steely calm. As a former diver, he knew the risks of Arctic waters better than anyone else on board. "I'll go down first," Lars said, his voice muffled by his mask. "I'll clear the area, then give you the signal." Camille nodded, readying her own gear. "Be careful. Visibility is limited in these waters, and it's easy to lose direction." The dive was intense. Camille and Lars descended into the icy depths, the cold biting through their wetsuits, while the Starlight Voyager crew watched from the surface. The water was a world of shadow and silence, a dark underworld illuminated only by their flashlights. Strange creatures drifted past, translucent and ghostly, their forms adapted to the freezing waters. As they swam deeper, Camille spotted a large jellyfish with tendrils that seemed to shimmer in the light, a species she'd never seen before. She signaled to Lars, who nodded, taking in the view with the silent reverence of a man who had seen many mysteries of the sea but respected each one. Then they heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound reverberating through the water, almost like a heartbeat. Camille froze, her light scanning the darkness. It was as if the sea itself were alive, pulsing with something ancient and powerful. "What is that?" Camille whispered through her comms. Lars shook his head. "I don't know, but let's stay close." As they turned to ascend, a massive shadow loomed in the distance, dark and unmoving. Camille's heart pounded as she pointed her light toward it, revealing nothing. Whatever it was had vanished, leaving only the eerie sound in its wake. They surfaced quickly, climbing back onto the yacht and removing their gear. Silver greeted them with a raised eyebrow. "Find anything interesting?" Camille hesitated, catching her breath. "Just strange sounds, rhythmic, almost like something alive down there." Ray snorted. "More likely an echo off the ice. This place plays tricks on you." But as the day wore on, they all found it harder to shake the feeling of something watching them. The wind carried strange echoes, and the ice groaned and creaked as though something massive shifted beneath it. Even the normally stoic Lars seemed unsettled. The filmmaker, a wiry woman named Alana, took her camera to the deck, setting it up to capture time-lapse footage of the ice flows. "I swear I saw something move on the edge of the flow," she whispered to Isla, who had joined her out of curiosity. "Not an animal, though, something bigger." "Probably just shadows," Isla replied, though she felt her skin prickle at the thought. That night, they gathered in the main cabin, huddled close for warmth. Aiden served steaming mugs of spiced tea, and Alana shared tales of Arctic legends she'd picked up from her travels. "There are stories of giant creatures," she said in a low voice. "Massive, ancient beings that live beneath the ice, only surfacing when their territory is threatened." Camille looked intrigued, though she tried to maintain a rational outlook. "I've read about geothermal vents under the Arctic ice that can create strange sounds and temperature shifts. That could explain what we heard." "Or maybe it's the ice playing tricks," Silver offered, though her tone was guarded. Even she felt a sense of unease. In the early hours of the morning, a loud, grinding noise woke the crew. The yacht lurched, sending books and equipment tumbling to the floor. Silver scrambled out of her bunk, her heart pounding. She raced to the deck to find Ray already there, staring in shock. The ice flow had shifted, closing in around the Starlight Voyager. Massive sheets of ice now boxed them in, towering like silent, frozen walls. "What the hell is going on?" Ray muttered, grabbing his wrench like it could fend off the Arctic itself. The crew worked frantically, trying to steer the yacht out of the ice trap, but the flow had them locked in tight. Alana filmed the scene, capturing the eerie beauty and terror of their predicament. Then came the sound again, that deep, rhythmic pulsing, louder than before. It echoed across the water, vibrating through the hull of the yacht. Everyone froze, listening, as if the Arctic itself were trying to communicate. "We need to get out of here," Isla whispered, fear stark in her eyes. But there was nowhere to go. The ice was closing in slowly, pressing tighter around the yacht. Silver took a steadying breath, trying to maintain her composure. She'd faced storms and tempests, but this was different. It was as if the sea itself had turned against them. "Lars," she said, turning to the ex-diver, "any ideas?" He shook his head, his gaze distant. "This isn't like anything I've encountered, but if we can just wait it out, the ice might shift again." Hours passed as they huddled in the cabin, listening to the eerie creaking of the ice and the pulsing sound that seemed to grow louder, more insistent. The crew was exhausted, nerves frayed, but they held their ground. Finally, just as dawn began to break, the ice shifted once more, the flow splitting open as if releasing them. Silver didn't hesitate. She steered the yacht forward, breaking free of the trap and pushing them into open water. As they put distance between themselves and the flow, the pulsing sound faded, leaving only the quiet, unbroken silence of the Arctic. The crew was silent, each one processing what they'd experienced. Ray muttered about needing a warm beach vacation, while Aiden served a strong round of coffee. Alana reviewed her footage, her face pale. "I caught something," she whispered, showing them the footage. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a dark shape beneath the ice, massive and undefined, like a shadow lurking in the depths. Camille stared, her rational mind struggling to make sense of it. "Maybe it's just a shadow," she said, but her voice wavered. The Arctic's mysteries seemed less like folklore and more like living reality after what they'd just experienced. As the yacht made its way south, the atmosphere on board remained tense. Every creak of the hull, every gust of the frigid wind, reminded them of that night trapped in the ice. Silver kept a steady hand on the wheel, her eyes scanning the horizon, while the rest of the crew worked in quiet determination. Days passed as they navigated through the vast, icy expanse. the eerie encounter fading into a memory softened by distance and the stark beauty of the Arctic landscape. Yet each of them felt it, a subtle shift, a deep respect for the harsh, unyielding nature of the Arctic and whatever might lie beneath its frozen surface. Camille found herself frequently drawn to the edge of the deck, watching the water as though hoping, or perhaps fearing, to catch another glimpse of that shadowy figure below. She replayed the footage Alana had shown them over and over, though the shape in the video remained elusive, defying any attempt at explanation. A week later, the Starlight Voyager neared Greenland's southern coast, where they planned to stop briefly for supplies. The closer they got to inhabited shores, the more the tension seemed to lift, replaced by the camaraderie and light-hearted banter that had always characterized life on the yacht. Even Ray, who'd been particularly gruff since the Arctic encounter, began muttering about finally reaching a port where he could find a decent hot meal. On their last night at sea, before reaching the small Greenlandic harbor, the crew gathered on deck to unwind. Aiden had prepared a feast of hearty soups and fresh bread, a rare treat in the Arctic's sparse conditions. As they laughed and shared stories of the voyage, the unsettling events of the past week seemed to fade into the background. "I'll tell you one thing," Isla said, raising her mug of spiced tea. "This has been the adventure of a lifetime. I'll take frozen seas over the tropics any day if it means we get to see things like that." Camille nodded, though a part of her was still lost in thought, captivated by the mystery beneath the ice. She turned to Lars, who had been silent throughout the evening. "You've seen a lot in your diving days," she began. "What do you think it was down there?" Lars took a slow sip of his tea, his gaze steady and unreadable. "I think it was something timeless, something beyond what we're meant to understand." Silver, listening from across the deck, gave a quiet nod. "The ocean keeps its secrets," she said. "We just have to respect them." As they neared the end of their journey, a feeling of calm settled over them, each crew member finding a sense of closure in their own way. They had faced one of the world's harshest environments, glimpsed a piece of the unknown, and come away with stories that would linger long after the frost had left their bones. In the morning, they arrived at the Greenlandic harbor, where the sun rose over the snow-capped mountains, casting golden light over the icy waters. The Starlight Voyager's crew gathered on deck one last time before disembarking, each of them taking in the view with newfound reverence. As they stepped onto solid ground, Camille glanced back at the yacht, her mind drifting back to the Arctic depths. She knew she'd carry the memory of that shadow beneath the ice for the rest of her life, a reminder that, no matter how far humanity ventured, there would always be places where mystery reigned, and the sea kept secrets of its own. And as the Starlight Voyager sailed south, bound for warmer waters, each member of its crew held a piece of the Arctic with them, a silent, unspoken bond forged beneath the stars and waves, where shadows lay hidden in the frozen depths.